Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show. My guest is Debbie Dooley, the co-founder of the American Tea Party. Debbie, thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
It's my pleasure. Well, you're also the president and founder of Conservatives for Energy Freedom.
Yes, sir.
And the Green Tea Coalition.
Yes.
So I want to talk about that as well. I haven't heard much about the American Tea Party and what's going on, and why haven't I heard much?
Well, we're still very active. It's about the 2010 timeframe, a lot of the Tea Party activists began to focus on their local issues and state issues. Donald Trump, his candidacy in 2016 just completely changed the Tea Party movement, because now all of a sudden we evolved from, a lot of the activists evolved from fiscal responsibility as our primary issue to America First policies, including on trade and things like that. And his candidacy in the beginning divided the Tea Party movement, because a lot of Tea Party activists were divided between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. But they've come back together. We're kind of like, the Tea Party movement is kind of like, you see a duck on the lake in the water. He's still on the surface, but underneath he's paddling quite vigorously. And that's essentially what's going on.
So it's interesting because you talked, your reference to kind of some of the initial motivation,
Yes,
in terms of fiscal responsibility. Whatever happened to fiscal responsibility? We're running deficits bigger than ever before. Nobody seems to care. What's going on?
Well, we do care, and I care. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's a Democrats in charge or Republicans in charge. Our elected representatives act like they're spending monopoly money. And that's something that I think is wrong. I know the Tea Party activist a few years ago actually supported a penny plan where 1 cent of, you cut spending 1 cent for every dollar, which would be 1%. There's so many lobbyists and money controls Washington, D.C. That's why we don't have a balanced budget. That's why spending has gotten out of control. If they were spending their own money, you'd see something quite different. Or if we told them, we're not going to pay you your salary unless you balance the budget, you'd see action quite quickly.
Yeah, well, I guess we're not going to see action very quickly.
Nope.
Okay, tell me about the Conservatives for Energy Freedom, and I'd like to know about the Green Tea Coalition.
Well, the Green Tea Coalition was founded first. It was in 2013, and I began, there was a fight in Georgia over 2 nuclear reactors, Plant Vogtle. They were just delays. They were massive cost overruns. In 2013, and really the end of 2012, I began raising red flags. I'm like, how is this possible? And the ratepayers will have to pay for it. It had the cost estimate, it was going way above what the original estimates was. It was delays, and I found out they were making a guaranteed profit of 10.5% to 11%. And I was appalled that this investor-owned utility was being allowed to profit from their failure. So I began to look at other energy forms, and I found out that a lot of the stuff that conservatives had been fed, the data about renewable energies was completely false, and it really started under the Bush administration. But the data was wrong. I said, you know what, renewable energies, that's something that protects our earth, protects our environment, and it's the newer technology of the future. It provides energy choice and energy freedom for individuals.
These are all conservative themes I'm hearing.
You would think so, and that's the thing. So I found a Green Tea Coalition, and we launched. It was activists from Sierra Club and the Tea Party movement came together, and we said, you know what, we're going to support a plan to require or ask Georgia Power to add more solar to their energy mix instead of relying on coal and very expensive nuclear. So we formed, and ever since then, I've been very active. I formed Conservatives for Energy Freedom to have a group just for conservatives, a conservative voice. I started out my journey into energy, into thinking climate change was a hoax, it's not real, and after I started, I actually talked to military folks, I did my own investigation, and I began to realize that was that was false data too. And I believe in climate change. I believe man's damaging the environment. And do I believe the doom and gloom, the earth is going to end in 10 years if we don't take action? No, but I support free market solutions to our environment.
So would you support three of the veterans and venerated Republican office holders in the past: George Shultz, of course, Secretary of the Treasury and Secretary of State; James Baker, also in that category; and Hank Paulson, former Secretary of the Treasury, came out with a carbon tax plan where they proposed a carbon tax with the money redistributed to the American people so it would be revenue neutral. And in exchange, they said we should be able to get rid of some regulations on top of it. Are you supportive of that kind of concept?
Not at this time, because I think that there's a lot of bad information that's gone out. And the minute you mention carbon tax, all of a sudden people are going to think about what happened in France with the Yellow Vest movement when they started putting a tax on gasoline. And I think it's good. I think, it needs some nuances, it needs some changes, because people are going to rebel if they have to pay more at the gas pump. I mean, we've seen that. We've seen what happened in France. And I think a big solution would be free market choice, move to a decentralized power structure, invest a lot of money in R&D research to microgrids, to move to a decentralized structure, use mini nukes, use solar panels, use wind, even some natural gas, hydropower, any of the new innovative technology to get people on board. I don't support excessive regulations. I don't support mandates, even though I truly believe the biggest mandate we have out there is to be told if you're in a state that's not deregulated, you have to purchase your electricity from this one company, and if you don't, you're out of luck. So I think that's the biggest mandate, but no, at this point, I would not support that. But more and more Republicans are coming out since I started. When I first began to be a strong advocate for renewables in 2013, and I'm a Tea Party, one of the national co-founders of the Tea Party movement. And so I'm right-wing. I'm kind of have libertarian leanings on some, I don't believe in endless wars and things like that. But I am a right-wing Republican, and they said, oh, you're a tree hugger. People that did not know me, like a lot of these Koch brothers funded groups and fossil fuel funded groups would say, oh, pay no attention to her, she's a liberal. She's a tree hugger. And I just laughed. I said, well, you clearly don't know me. And so, I mean, that's the thing, is that they put a lot of information out there, and once they realize, no, we can't say that about her anymore, then they stopped the attacks on that. But I was one of very, very few Republicans advocating for renewables, but that changed. Representative Matt Gaetz is in, I think that's the way you spell his name, is in Florida. Right-wing, leaning Tea Party, leaning conservative. He's a strong advocate for climate change. He believes in renewables. You have a Tea Party Congressman, Thomas Massey, in coal country in Kentucky. He may not believe in climate change, but he's a very strong renewable energy advocate. He drives a Tesla. He supports solar panels. He believes in being good stewards of the environment God gave us. And, that's the thing. So it's just like more and more speaking out. And I think George Shultz's plan has a long way to go before I'm able to support it.
All right. Well, when we come back, I'm going to ask you then, If you don't support a carbon tax, how do we achieve those climate change objectives? All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Debbie Dooley in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
The Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbertv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. I'm with Debbie Dooley of the Green Tea Coalition. So Debbie, all right, you nixed, at least for now, the carbon tax. Given your understanding of the seriousness of climate change and the challenges it's already presenting and is about to present in the next few decades, what can we do that would really have a severe, not just serious, but severe impact?
I think we talk about the R&D research into decentralizing our grid. Imagine the impact on our carbon footprint if you have tens and millions or even hundreds of millions of homes in America that have rooftop solar. That we have the mini nukes that is in R&D stage now, where it's so decentralized they can generate their own power, or the neighborhoods. How far would that go to reducing our carbon footprint? One of the things about carbon tax is that what happened in France showed us you have to get the people behind you. The people aren't going to be behind somebody trying to raise their gas tax. That's just not going to happen. So let's talk about innovation. Look at the cell phone. When the cell phone first came on the scene, I think it was 1984, Motorola, it was called the brick, because it was so heavy you'd have to charge it for 20.
It was the size of a brick.
It was, and it was heavy, you had to charge it overnight. So what happened is all of a sudden new technology came on board, needed work. You didn't see the government going out banning landlines or anything like that. It was supply and demand. There was a market for it, and it caused innovation. I believe that fossil fuel and other energy forms that pollute the environment should have to be fully responsible for cleaning up the damage, including any health-related cost. And I just am a strong believer. Republicans' attitudes have changed. There was a poll taken by a Republican polling firm, I think it was the end of November of 2016, and it found almost 70% of Trump voters supported more involvement with the government to encourage more solar.
So in that vein,
Yes, sir,
I assume in 2016 you supported Donald Trump.
I did.
And are you going to support him again in 2020?
Absolutely.
Despite your differences on climate change. He calls climate change a hoax.
Well, I think he's misinformed. You know,
Well, you're probably not the only one.
that would say that. You know, I think my dad used to tell me, if you find somebody you agree with 100% of the time, then one of you is insane. And I believe that. But I disagree with a lot of the things he's saying on energy, and I would love the opportunity, you know, to be able to sit down in the Oval Office and talk to him about that. I mean, people that say fossil fuels don't damage the environment, I would tell them to pull their car in the garage, leave the car running, and close the garage door. Okay? So if fossil fuels aren't damaging the environment, then it won't harm them physically. And we all know it would kill them. So I think money, what really changed about climate change and the way Republicans think, because if you go back in our history, you will see that we were conservation. Look at Teddy Roosevelt, Richard Nixon created the EPA. Ronald Reagan, believe it or not, made the statement that being good stewards of the environment should not be a partisan issue. He did that when he was signing the Montreal Protocol that banned fluorocarbons. And under the Bush administration, if there was a Rolling Stone article written, I think it was in June 28, 2007, talked about the misinformation that was coming from the Bush administration about climate change. You start putting big money to convince people it's not true, and all of a sudden, you know, they're very skeptical. But I believe that, I believe the tide has turned, and I think free market solutions, you know, that's the answer. You have to have your people on your side.
So how do you get President Trump and Mitch McConnell and Republicans in the Senate to come on board with you?
I think it has to be an outcry from the grassroots. It has to be an uprising from the people demanding this. In Georgia, we're a red state. We're one of the top states leading the nation in solar. And it's not because of climate change, it's because of free market solutions and market choice, and because the cost has come down. Facebook wanted to locate a big data center in Georgia, south of Atlanta. And they told George Power, we want 100% renewable energy, be able to get that before we locate there. And it happened. And they leased farmland, and a lot of the farmers were happy to have solar panels on their farmland. And
That's because they got paid for those.
Absolutely, they got paid, and it really helped save their family farms. But when we have corporations starting to go into states demanding, we want 100% renewables, all of a sudden, you know, the tide begins to shift. And I really see that it's like we're in the midst of an energy revolution. And it's a renewable energy revolution. And you better get on the train or get off the track, because we're going to run you over.
All right, how about getting other conservatives on board? What is the challenge there?
The challenge is to cut through all the misinformation and propaganda they've been fed that's completely wrong. And the weather, look at the weather patterns and natural disasters that we've had recently. And I mean, more and more people are talking about the crazy weather. So Mother Nature is actually helping convince conservatives, hey, maybe it's right. Maybe people are right about climate change, and we need to do something. Solar, especially rooftop solar, really appeals to conservatives because they can generate their own power on their rooftop. I believe people should have the ability to not only generate their own power from solar panels, but sell excess power to their neighbors. And that way we could make Americans entrepreneurs that have solar panels on their rooftop.
Well, I'm all for that. All right, we're going to take our last break. We'll be back with Debbie Dooley in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
Safely stop fires around your home. Introducing the Fire Ice XT 20-ounce aerosol canister. Fire Ice XT is an eco-friendly water-based fire suppressant gel. Unlike a traditional fire extinguisher, Fire Ice XT is a highly effective, non-toxic firefighting agent that is easy and safe to use around your home, family, and pets. Available at Amazon.com or call 800-924-4874.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scenes photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. We are with Debbie Dooley. So Debbie, in terms of your conversations, how do we maybe change the conversation on energy in the United States? So it's really a bipartisan conversation. I mean, clearly, you're doing your part in the sense of educating conservatives. I mean, if folks on the right are going to be educated, it's not going to be by folks on the left.
Absolutely, it's all about the message. When you first began to talk to Republicans about energy and you want them to support renewables, don't lead off talking to them about climate change. Lead off talking to them about national security, energy choice, free market solutions to it. You'll find them very, very receptive to that. And trust me, I've tried different messages with conservative audiences. And that's something. And a lot of my friends on the left, one of the biggest mistakes they make is they assume, well, that person's a Trump supporter. So Trump doesn't believe in climate change, so I'm not going to bother. That's a mistake. Being good stewards of our environment, like Ronald Reagan said, it is a bipartisan, it should not be partisan solution. The air we breathe is not Republican air or Democrat air. It belongs to all of us, and we owe it to future generations of Americans to get it right. I'm out there, I have very limited resources, but I'm out there convincing conservatives, and when you have somebody like Congressman Matt Gaetz in Florida speaking out, it's like more and more folks, in the beginning, when Bob Inglis, for example, he was a congressman from South Carolina, years ago before I got involved, spoke out about it. Koch brothers funded a challenger to him, and they defeated him. I took a step out on the limb. I'm a preacher's kid, so I've never been afraid to step out on the limb for what I believe in. And I did, and I said, I'm doing what's right. I don't care, you let the slings and arrows come my way. People are going to see eventually that I'm right. And I was. And that's what we have to do. It's all about the message. And people know. If you go to a conservative and you said, since the world was created, it's always been changing, but man's making that change worse. All of a sudden, yeah, it is. I mean, how can they say it's not? Look at the instances of asthma and the air and things like that. They can't say that. They can't. And as I said, Mother Nature is going a long way to convince folks that we are damaging the earth and we need to do something about it. So if you talk to conservatives about innovative solutions and market-driven solutions, instead of saying mandates, we need to start banning substances, they'll be much more responsive to you.
All right, now you mentioned the Koch brothers, and my impression from your two references is you're not a big fan of the Koch brothers.
You are absolutely correct. I am not, because I've been on I'm kind of a fighter, and I've seen what they do. I've been involved with the conservative movement since 1976. So I know what was being done. And I see all these groups go out and start putting out misinformation. They put out, and their groups put out a lot of misinformation about climate change and about renewables. When I got involved in 2013 to encourage the PSC, Public Service Commission, that are regulators, to, come to an agreement to add more solar to Georgia Power's energy portfolio mix. We were butting heads with Americans for Prosperity that were putting out completely false information about what we were asking. I was on MSNBC's Chris Hayes show in July of 2013, and I called them out. I said, they lied about it. I mean, the lights aren't going to go off. Your toaster's not going to go off because you add more renewables. That's ridiculous. And so I know firsthand from being in the fights whose money's behind it. And that's why I point out Koch brothers.
And why do you think they're doing that?
Because a lot of times they made their money from coal and from fossil fuels or the equipment from them. And I think it's because they care more about their pocketbook than they do care about protecting our environment.
You know, it's really interesting in terms of the political kind of perspective. I've had religious leaders on the show, Christian religious leaders, who argue that conservation is a Christian principle, and that conservatives and Christians should be leading the fight to conserve the planet and to care for the planet. And you made that same reference. So I'm going to be interested to see what really happens over time, and if enough people do follow that lead and your lead. But speaking of leaders, I'd just be really curious. In your opinion, because you've dealt with people at all levels of leadership. What in your opinion makes for a great leader?
You've got to actually put the people you represent and the constituency, you've got to put them first, not the people that contribute to your campaign or fill your campaign coffers up. You've got to be able to make tough decisions that may be unpopular, but decisions you think is right. You've got to be able to step out and say, hey, this is the right thing, this is going to be done, because I think, and make your case that this is why you're doing it, and that you're doing it to support your constituency.
What about if you had to pick one or two great leaders, whether currently or going back thousands of years, whatever you want? Are there any leaders that you've always looked to and felt were really exceptional or extraordinary?
Well, I like Ronald Reagan, of course. I'm a big fan of Margaret Thatcher. I used to have a T-shirt that it was one of her statements that said, "Women who behave rarely make history," and that's absolutely correct. I think she's a good leader. I think Donald Trump, even though I disagree with him on some issues, I think he has shown that he has courage, and having courage is something a good leader has to have. Now, he needs to work on his Twitter, but I mean, he really needs to work on that and, just say, okay, we have to get this approved. But I think he has, because he's not afraid to tackle tough issues.
So what do you think he should do about Twitter? I'm kind of curious.
I think he should just say, okay, here's a Twitter, and not send it out. Wait and think about it. Not send it out for an hour, then send it out.
I don't know. I think he has way too much fun with Twitter.
I think he does too, and look at his audience. Look how many people, tens of millions of people, follow him on Twitter. And that's the thing with Donald Trump. You have to admit, he knows he was smart enough to be able to utilize that, because he was not going to have the mainstream media on his side. So he said, okay, I'm going to use social media. And he's been very effective at getting his message out.
Nobody can argue with that. Debbie, thank you so much.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Great having you on the show. That was Debbie Dooley of the Green Tea Party. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.